She gave me 72 hours to tear down my own home, no knock, no hearing. Not even a real question, just a deadline. And this little smile that said she thought she'd already won. But the second she tried to lock me out of my own cabin, something inside me snapped, something no HOA policy was ever going to control. Maybe you've seen it before too, some person with a badge and a taste for power who suddenly thinks they're royalty. Yeah, that was Margaret Thompson in our neighborhood. My name is David Miller. I'm 58, and after 35 years working as a county land inspector in California, all I really wanted was a little piece. I inherited my dad's cabin on Pine Lake, part of a 50-acre plot he bought back in 85 to build a community where neighbors respected each other for a while it worked. But then Margaret rolled in 3 years ago, took over as HOA president at 52, and pretty much started running the place like her own private FFT laundry lines banned no planting flowers unless you begged for a permit you wanted. To paint your front door better run it by Margaret, most folks kept their heads down and their mouths shut, but I'd spent decades dealing with people like her. I knew the rules, the loopholes, every single property line, and she just picked the absolute worst person to mess with. A whole mess started over a sunflower. I kid you not, I planned it on a whim. Just wanted something bright to greet me in the morning. Next day, there's Margaret, clipboard and hand voice, sweet as poison, telling me I need approval. For landscape changes, I laughed and said, I'd plant what I pleased. That's when her smile dropped, and I could practically see the gears turning in her head. What she didn't know was that my father bought all 50 acres, then leased 45 to the HOA for $1 a year, symbolic fee really. Because he believed in good neighbors, not tight-fisted landlords. I inherited that land, never raised the rent. Guess I figured if you treat people right, they'll do the same. Margaret decided to teach me a lesson Monday. There's a $200 fine on my door. Improper vehicle placement. My old truck hadn't moved in 3 years. Wednesday, another $300 for unauthorized construction, meaning the fishing chair I built by the lake. Friday, $150 for non-compliant exterior paint. My cabin's been natural since the day it was built, but apparently that wasn't good enough for Margaret's color palette. Every fine came with threats, community standards, escalating enforcement, the works, but I wasn't. New to this game, I started taking photos, making notes, recording dates, and times, professional habit, I guess. My gut told me something was off, so I pulled out every HOA document, lease agreement, and bylaw I could find, and she upped the ante, organized an emergency HOA meeting. Didn't even invite me. She painted me as this dangerous disruptor. Neighbors who used to wave suddenly looked the other way. Tom Johnson stopped inviting me to barbecues. Mrs. Garcia pulled her grandkids inside. When I passed by, Margaret said I was unstable. Dangerous, dragging down property values. She played the hero, trying to protect the community from the crazy old man by the lake. I'll admit it stung, losing friends I'd known for years. But Margaret's mistake was underestimating my patience while she was busy whispering behind my back. I was installing security cameras and digging into HOA financials. Then she made an official, called the cops on me, said I threatened her during a conversation about her authority. Police showed up, reviewed my footage, found nothing but me standing on my own porch asking polite questions, but just having those cars in my driveway gave Margaret fresh ammo. She ran straight to the neighborhood Facebook page, warning everyone about safety concerns. Officer Martinez took me aside as they left, told me, we see this kind of HOA nonsense a lot more than you think. Keep documenting, David. So I did. Then things got me, and I came home from the store and found my mailbox ripped out and replaced by a temporary one holding another violation notice. Then the landscaping crew accidentally trimmed the old oak that shaded my porch. Margaret claimed its branches were encroaching. Everything she did skirted just inside the law, but was calculated to make me miserable, hoping I'd finally pack up and leave. She didn't know I was ready to fight. Fire with fire. The real breaking point came one Saturday morning. I got back from town and found my garden fence torn apart, my sunflower hacked down to the dirt. Margaret had hired a crew to remove non-compliant plantings and structures. She left a final notice taped to my door, 72 hours to tear down illegal structures, or the HOA would do it for me. My cameras caught the whole thing. Margaret playing as Day telling her crew, this old man needs to learn his place. I sat there staring at the ruins of my fence and the empty spot where my sunflower used to be, and for the first time in weeks, I just started laughing. She'd finally crossed a line from petty harassment to criminal property damage. I headed for my basement safe and pulled out the original land agreements. Then I called James Morrison, the real estate attorney, who'd helped my dad write the lease back in 85. David, I've been waiting 40 years for this day. James said. We poured over those papers, grinning wider with every clause of the lease. Let me raise the rent to fair market value with 30 days notice. I'd been charging the HOA $1 a year For decades now, lakefront property here's worth about $10,000 an acre, 45 acres. That's $450,000 a year. Oh, and Margaret's little rampage grounds for a civil suit and maybe criminal charges. James drafted a notice hiking the rent, I gathered. Evidence of every rule Margaret had broken. Digging deeper, I found she'd built a pool and clubhouse without proper permits on my land. She doubled HOA fees without a member vote, skimmed $15,000 from the community fund for her own landscaping. I even found forged meeting minutes and signatures. But the real twist, Robert Thompson, Margaret's own husband, showed up one night, eyes red, hands shaking. "I can't watch this anymore," he said. "Margaret's not the woman I married. She's cruel." He handed me a USB drive, emails, texts, all the proof of her dirty tricks. He said she even threatened families if they didn't vote for her. By then it was game over, James. And I finished the paperwork, $450,000, rent demand, civil lawsuit, criminal complaint, and a formal call for an emergency community meeting. I tipped off a local reporter, Sarah Kim, who'd covered abusive HOAs before. Turns out Margaret had a history. She left her last neighborhood in disgrace. That Wednesday I called the meeting room was packed, 67 households, more neighbors than I'd seen in one place since the 4th of July parade. Margaret tried to strut in thick folder under her arm, thinking she could control the room. I stood up and asked, "How many of you know who owns the land under your homes?" Blank stares all around except Margaret, who suddenly looked queasy. I pulled out the deed and said, "I'm David Miller. My father bought this land in 1985, leased it to the HOA for $1 a year. That lease is now over, rent's going to $450,000 a room." Went dead silent. I showed video of Margaret destroying my fence, and Sunflower, her voice crystal clear, teach this old man his place. Then I laid out the fake budgets, unauthorized fees, threats, and embezzlement. Every bit of it. Neighbors started to speak. Up, Mrs. Garcia in tears apologized for believing Margaret's lies. Tom Johnson told everyone about being fined $800 just because his kids played on the grass. Lisa Park, a single mom, said Margaret threatened to ban her kids from the playground if she didn't vote for her. Every story was worse than the last. Margaret finally lost it, yelling that I was destroying everything she'd built, accusing me of manipulating everyone. I just asked, what kind of community are we if families are afraid to plant flowers, if kids can't play outside, if people go hungry paying your fines? She didn't have anything left to say. Sarah Kim, the journalist, stood and spoke to the room. "This is one of the worst HOA abuses of power I've ever reported. Mr. Miller could evict all of you right now. People look afraid. But I said, I'm not here to evict anybody, but you need leadership that serves the community." They voted Margaret out right there, 64. The relief was palpable. Margaret packed up and left, head down, followed by her husband, who looked 20 years younger. Already Mrs. Garcia took over as interim president, apologized publicly, and asked me to assist with writing new fair rules. The whole affair blew up. Sarah's story went viral. And suddenly I was receiving emails from people all over the country with their own HOA horror stories. Even the state passed new HOA transparency legislation. Thanks in part to our case, Pine Lake changed, fees decreased, silly restrictions disappeared, and families began planting flowers, hanging laundry, letting their children play outside again. Robert Thompson remained, helped pay back the stolen funds, and became a friend. Margaret was forced to sell her home, pay restitution, and perform community service for property damage, ironically at the same shelter she once threatened to close for being non-compliant. Today, 2 years later, I'm sitting in the same chair Margaret once tried to have destroyed, looking over a community garden where 15 families now grow sunflowers. We call it Sunflower Day the day we reclaimed our neighborhood. There's a note on my door, carved by Robert David Miller, community friend, the only title that matters. My dad envisioned a peaceful community, and it finally existed. Sometimes you have to stand up and fight for peace. The greatest victory isn't defeating the bad guys. It's creating something better out of the mess they attempted to create. Margaret believed she could turn me into the enemy in the end. She gave me a chance to become the heart of this place, and those sunflowers, they turned their faces to the sun, just like we all learn to do, turn away from darkness towards hope. But I had to wonder, was I right to push back, or did I go too far? How much control should one person have over a community? Drop your thoughts below, because this kind of struggle between authority and actual justice is still playing out everywhere every